Hey, so this is Walton and Seth to present our visualization final project. Our visualization focuses on um, information about U.S. energy. So we're going to go through a few of the features in our visualization and then uh, talk about some findings that we found using our own viz. So first, we have an interactive map view showing average electricity rate, cents per kilowatt hour for each state. Um, if you scroll over individual states, you will see the name of the state and the price and the average price of electricity in cents per kilowatt hour. In the top left, um, you have a slider that will change the prices in each state by month for a span of 13 months over the course of 2015 through 2016. If you don't want to manually scroll through, you can press a start button and it will change it for you. Um, yeah.
So for the second part of our visualization, we detailed all the power plants in the United States and the kind of electricity they output. So if you click on the Show Plants button, the average electricity rate shading goes away so that you can see the plants a little bit better. And when you first click it, it's a little overwhelming, but then if you want to focus on, say, one kind of plant, you can just select it and say, I want to see all the wind plants and maybe also all the natural gas plants. And you can look at sort of their output as a function of how big the circles are on the map. And then the total output, the total size of these bars is related to how much sort of in aggregate all of these kinds of power we rely on. So for example, coal and natural gas are the highest with about 1.35 petawatt hours, but things like solar are still rising, and those have around 25 terawatt hours of total electricity generated over this whole year.
Now we're going to talk about some of the observations that we found using our visualization. In this first part, I'm going to point out some of the more interesting states in the country. For example, California, as you can see, starts off with a pretty high rate of high average electricity rate, but as the months go into the winter months, you can see the price progressively drop down and then come back up in the summer. Um, this might be a correlation with heat and electricity used for air conditioning. Another interesting trend is Alabama, where, as you can see, compared to the states in its general vicinity, has a much higher average electricity rate. Um, After doing some research, we found that this might be due to the fact that residents in Alabama use electricity for both heating and cooling, whereas in other states, people tend to use oil or natural gas for their heating. Um, if you take a look at Hawaii, you'll notice that there aren't that many power plants on the islands. And as a result, they have to ship a lot of their power from the mainland, resulting in a higher average electricity rate.
So if we now take a look at all of the power plants in the United States, especially by type, there's a lot of things that are quite intuitive that we can see. For example, the wind plants don't generate as much electricity in each plant, but there's a lot of them around the United States, which means that they're a pretty significant portion of our energy right now. Whereas something like nuclear has a much smaller total amount of plants, but each one you can see is sort of vastly bigger than any of the individual wind plants, which means that nuclear is giving us a lot more energy right now. The solar plants are a lot like wind in that there's a lot of them, but they don't produce very much alone as a power plant. You can imagine that almost every house has a solar capability, but of course it's not a power plant, so it wouldn't actually be generating very much electricity. It makes sense that places like Nevada and California and New Mexico have a lot of solar plants because if we look at sort of the amount of solar energy that they could be getting, this map shows that there's a lot of solar energy around the areas where we do see a lot of solar plants and a lot of energy output. But then up in Massachusetts here, we see barely any with respect to it's some of the least in all of the United States. So how is this the case? And upon a little bit more research, we saw that Massachusetts has recently put a lot of public funds into solar subsidies that have actually made it so that our solar capabilities in Massachusetts have doubled over the past 2 or 3 years. One last thing that we want to mention is that, especially with the power plant size as well as these bar lengths, the actual energy output is over on the right, and we had to use some pretty intense scaling to get sort of the scale of geothermal, which is around 16 terawatt hours, to line up and be sort of appreciable and visible next to the size of natural and other gas, which means that the scales are a little bit off. I think everything is on a square root scale, which means that right, like hydroelectric isn't actually half the size of nuclear, and a nuclear plant that's sort of this big compared to a hydroelectric plant that's that small means that the nuclear plant is sort of far outweighing anything that's not around its size. But yeah, this is Walton and Seth's U.S. energy information data set analysis, and thanks for watching.
Yeah, boy.
Sweet.